Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer, second episode in 2024, and I'm very happy to have a returning guest, former Governor of Alabama, Don Siegelman, and the last Democrat to have served in that position. Governor, it's good to have you.
Well, yeah, so let's hope I'm not the last governor to
Yeah.
ever serve, a Democratic governor to serve in the state of Alabama. So, how did you get the name Blue Dog Whisperer? That's a very clever name.
Well, I'm not in Congress, but I've always identified with the Blue Dog Caucus or the coalition, and I've donated to them. And this podcast started in 2020 when I had a lot of spare time on my hands, the lockdown, and I just came up with the name. So there we go.
Well, it's a good one. We need more. We need a lot of Blue Dog Whisperers out there. This is a 2024 as of course is a critical election, and we have Joe Biden on the ballot again.
Yeah.
I first became acquainted with him in the early 70s. We were running a national voter registration and delegate selection campaign in 47 states, and so Joe was active, and we were all the young guys were looking at him thinking, this guy, he's going to run for the U.S. Senate at the age of what, 28 or something, I think he was.
He was about,
And
yeah.
so we thought, if he does this, then we all need to, we're all out here battling the war and the Vietnam War and trying to get a peace candidate elected president. And here he is running for the U.S. Senate. So he has been an inspiration to not only me, but to a lot of people throughout the country, a lot of young people. And I say that even though he's the oldest guy on the ballot, but Joe still has the heart that he had in 1970. He cares about people. He comes from a working class, working family background, and working families are at his heart. He loves our democracy and is fighting to defend it. So, we have to see what happens in tomorrow's primary in Georgia. But, what I'm looking for there is, not so much the outcome, because we know it's going to be Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But I want us to take a look at the voter turnout and see what kind of enthusiasm there is, and what we need to do to adjust our efforts at this stage of the campaign.
Well, I've always been a big fan of Joe Biden. Having lived in South Jersey in the past, he was kind of course, I wasn't living down there when he was, before he was vice president, but before that, he was kind of known as New Jersey or South Jersey's unofficial third senator. So we think highly of President Biden, and I remember on vacation in 2008, we traveled from New Jersey to DC, and as we passed through Delaware, my mom said, "This is the home state of who our next vice president might be, Joe Biden," and we always thought highly of him. And I remember watching the inauguration with my mom. She let me take off from school in middle school. I was 11, almost 12. And when Biden was sworn in, she cheered because it meant that no more Dick Cheney in the VP, but also we thought highly of the senator from Delaware. So
Yeah, he's a great man, and I think there's no question that Joe Biden will go down in history as one of the greatest presidents in our history. So I am pulling for him, and pulling for not only him but for our country. There's so much at stake. It's hard to imagine, for me. It's hard to imagine that the country would turn from Joe Biden to Donald Trump for president. But if we don't want that to happen, then we have to work to get him elected.
I want to talk a little bit about Biden, but before I do, I have to ask because you are from Alabama. Katie Britt gave the State of the Union response. What the hell was that? What the hell was that?
It was, I, you know, every people who know her feel like she is a better person, but she sunk to an all-time low. First of all, it was a horrible performance. I mean, whoever, the NRC put her speech together, I'm sure, and she added her own little twist to it. I'm sure they got together and said, "Oh, where should we do this? Should it be a podium? Oh no, I want to do it in the kitchen. I want to, we need to make you look like you're the average." Uh, I don't know. They were trying to make her look like a quote housewife, like a stay-at-home mom or something. And it was the most embarrassing performance for a rebuttal for a State of the Union that anyone could ever imagine. Not only, I mean, it was just awful,
It
but
true.
it did inspire a lot of commentary. And frankly, instead of helping the Republicans, I think it actually, uh, pulled back the veil and showed how uh, uh, fraught with fakeness this whole thing is. The, one would, keep thinking that some of the old progressive Republicans will show their hand, that they will stand up and say, something like, this is not the Republican Party that drew me into the GOP. But they have also remained silent for the most part. So the more embarrassing it becomes, I think the more likely it is that we will see some cracks and um, some people standing up and saying that this is not the right direction for the Republican Party. So as bad of a performance Katie Britt's performance was, I think it probably helped the Democrats more than anything else that could have helped, uh, after Joe Biden's really phenomenal State of the Union speech.
I felt like I was watching a really bad ASPCA commercial during Katie Britt's State of the Union response. It really felt, I mean, it really felt like you might as well have had Sarah McLachlan singing with her, to be perfectly honest. But I wanted to ask, so the Republicans and the Democrats barely agree on anything, but they all agree Katie Britt's performance was bad. Prior to that, what was your impression of Katie Britt?
I don't know her. I've never met her, but the people that grew up with her, that went to school with her, feel like she is a moderate, someone who is. She grew up in and around a diverse community, because of Fort Rucker, which is in that area. It has a number of African Americans, a number of Asians, and so she had a chance to see what diversity was like when she was growing up. But she has thrown all of that out the window to cater to the far right, uh, of the Republican uh, base here in Alabama.
Mhm.
It's really, really shameful and disappointing. And you almost feel sorry for somebody like that loses their way when they had a chance to distinguish themselves as a decent and honorable person, and instead flushed all of that down the toilet to cater to this new right-wing, authoritarian, racist. We could go on with the superlatives, but anyway, it's done, and I think she is probably done.
Yeah, probably. And the response was very different from the Clinton years. I'm a political junkie, so our former governor of New Jersey, Governor Christie Whitman, gave the response one year in, I think it was 94 or 95, and it sounded so much different than Katie Britt's. I mean, I could not even picture Governor Whitman doing anything remotely similar to what Katie Britt did. It is a totally different party now. So, um, did you ever know Governor Whitman?
I did not. I was governor from '99 to 2003. But I of course I was in politics from 1978 until 2003. So I had a chance to meet and get to know a lot of Republicans who are either Secretary of State, Attorney General, and kind of Lieutenant Governor was a different animal. It was a little bit too political, so we didn't. Democrats didn't associate with Republicans during that experience as Lieutenant Governor. But as governor, we encountered Republicans, and they encountered progressive Democrats, and we formed alliances and learned from each other. It was much less acrimonious in those days.
So let's talk about, what did you think of President Biden's State of the Union? Was it what the doctor needed, what the doctor prescribed, I should say?
I thought he did an excellent job. Joe, he has a difficulty with his speech, and he tries to overcome that, I think, by talking fast, and as a result, he loses some clarity in uh, his enunciation. But overall, I thought he knocked it out of the park. I thought his performance was good. His response to the Republicans was humorous and uh, powerful. So no, I thought he did. I thought he did extremely well.
And he baited them. I mean, it happened last year and it happened again this year. I was actually surprised that he was able to do it twice when he said, okay, so we agree, no tax cuts for the wealthy.
Yeah, and I know you can read. He was. Joe was on it. So he did a spectacular job.
Very snarky, and it's amazing how he can go from an empathetic father to 1 minute, from 1 minute, and then the next minute he's that scrappy Irish kid from Scranton.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. That scrappy Irish kid from Scranton.
Yeah, you can tell he's got some Irish in him. And so I wanted to ask also, because we have some important issues going on in Alabama. The death penalty, for starters. Governor Ivey recently, if I'm not mistaken, approved a nitrogen not injection, but a nitrogen execution. And I know that you and the former governor of Alabama, Robert Bentley, both co-wrote a letter or an op-ed in one of the publications about the death penalty and how you kind of regret the way you did it back during both of your administrations. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. Alabama has 164 people on death row, and arguably 146 of the 164 would not be on death row in any other state for two reasons. Alabama still allows death sentences by a non-unanimous jury. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that in order to convict someone of a crime that could result in death, it had to be by a unanimous jury. Even though the Supreme Court didn't say that a jury recommendation of death had to be unanimous, every state agreed that it should be unanimous, except for Alabama. So Alabama was until last year the only state that allowed a death sentence by a non-unanimous jury. We have 115 people on death row, 54 of whom are Black, who were sentenced by non-unanimous juries. We have another anomaly in that Alabama has 30 people on death row who were sentenced to death not by a jury, but by a single judge. The person who was recently executed by nitrogen hypoxia, by smothering, basically you take all the oxygen out and give the person nitrogen, and they suffocate. It's like waterboarding, but with gas. He was actually sentenced to life in prison on a vote of 11-1 by a jury. 11 jurors voted for life in prison. Only one juror voted for death. But the judge sided with that one juror and sentenced this man to die. So Governor Ivey tried to kill him with It's not funny. I don't know why, but tried to kill him with the lethal injection. And when that failed, they re-sentenced him, or not re-sentenced him, but rescheduled his execution with this experimental form of gas, which had never been tried anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. No country had ever executed someone using nitrogen gas. So Alabama again, um, did something that unfortunately will probably encourage some other states to follow suit. So, uh, yes, Kenneth Eugene Smith was executed by nitrogen hypoxia. There's some other anomalies that we're fighting with regard to the death penalty in Alabama.
So this is a very big deal because this is the first method of execution with involving nitrogen gas that was ever executed, I should say. And Alabama was the first state to do that. While you were governor, there were some people who were put to death during that time period. Were you ever present when the execution took place?
No, I was not. I was on the phone with as Attorney General with the warden during the time of the executions when I was Attorney General, but was not. I did not get that up close when I was governor. And I will tell you this: one of the things I wrote about in the Washington Post this past May, the article, the op-ed to which you referred earlier,
Mhm.
I mentioned that it's now 24 years later. There was a man executed during my term as governor on March the 3rd in the year 2000. But over the last 24 years, additional evidence has emerged, evidence that was not available at the time of his execution, which today, in my view, clearly shows that he was wrongfully charged, wrongfully convicted, and wrongfully executed for a murder he did not commit. He was guilty. He was guilty. He was with the people, and he was one of those people did murder these two people, but it wasn't Freddie Lee Wright. It is clear to me that in the haste to charge someone, district attorneys sometimes do things, or police in the investigation of crimes sometimes do things to frame someone for a crime they clearly did not commit. Prosecutors get 99% of the indictments they seek. Prosecutors, district attorneys, attorneys general, U.S. attorneys across the board get 99% of the indictments they seek. There's a reason for that, and the reason is that the Supreme Court in 1976 voted unanimously that prosecutors would be free from civil liability. They cannot be sued even for knowingly and intentionally presenting false evidence, false testimony, or withholding exculpatory evidence to frame someone. As absurd as that seems, that was the rule of the day starting in 1976. In 2010, on January the 4th, Elena Kagan's deputy, the Solicitor General's office, argued to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I quote, U.S. citizens do not have a constitutional right not to be framed. And the sad part about that is, the Solicitor General didn't have to argue that point. She could have argued that while it is the law of the land, established by the Supreme Court in 1976 that prosecutors can't be sued civilly for targeting someone and framing someone for a crime they didn't commit. That shouldn't be the law, but she didn't argue that. She argued that U.S. citizens do not have a constitutional right not to be framed. That is still the law today. It is in the case that Elena Kagan was referring to. It was there were two young black teenagers who were clearly framed by investigators, by police investigators, for a murder they didn't commit. The police didn't want to go down a trail that led them initially to a white suspect who was a friend of the police department's.
Mm-hmm.
So they bribed a young felon to testify against these two black teenagers, and they put them in prison for 25 years for a crime they didn't commit. So, you know, there are ways we need to, that the Congress needs to address this issue. We first got to repeal the immunity that's granted to prosecutors so that no prosecutor, no prosecutor in this country should be able to knowingly and willfully frame someone for a crime they didn't commit. But in fact, that is the case. Now, one more little statistic and I'll stop. The Death Penalty Information Center did a study last year, well, it's 2021, that showed that since 1976, for every 8.3 people executed, one person has been exonerated, which statistically means we've been getting it wrong about 12% of the time. They went on to find that of those people exonerated, around 80% are exonerated because of prosecutorial or police misconduct, presenting false evidence, false testimony, withholding exculpatory evidence. And of those people exonerated because of misconduct of prosecutors, 87%, 87.9%, I think it is, almost 90% are black people. So it means that prosecutors have been targeting black folks for murders they didn't commit.
Right.
So, you know, the issue of criminal justice reform is a life or death issue, not only in Alabama, but across the country.
So to be clear, do you favor repealing the death penalty or abolishing it?
Well, yes, I do now, because I know that it is fraught with danger. How can you allow prosecutors to deliberately target black people for murders they didn't commit and not be against the death penalty? Right. You know, this country needs to come to grips with, if you're going to have the death penalty, then for God's sakes, hold prosecutors accountable for lying and convicting people for crimes they didn't commit. But you can't have it both ways. If you want to have the death penalty, let's have a process that is fair and constitutional and not based on race.
Right. I agree.
And you know, that's not the way it is in the United States of America today.
Right. We only have about a minute and a half left, but I want to ask if the death penalty remains in Alabama or any other state, do you think that the governors who signed off on the execution should have to witness the execution?
Oh, I think it would be, yes. I think they ought to be there and ought to be front and center. And it's just wrong. You know, we can't allow this to go on, knowing that 12% of the time we are executing the wrong person. We can't let it go on when we know that when people are targeted by prosecutors, that 80 to 90% of them are black people who are wrongfully targeted.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we're almost out of time, but Governor, I thank you so much for coming on. And I understand from the last conversation we had about 3 years ago that you have a book. What is the name of the book and where can they find it, my listeners?
Well, you can find it on Amazon. It was a #1 new release in 2020. It's called Stealing Our Democracy. And there's also a documentary that was done by an independent producer called Atticus versus the Architect, the political assassination of Don Siegelman. So I would recommend buying the Audible book. You can listen to me tell my story in my own voice on Amazon, or go to Amazon Prime and spend $4 and enjoy an hour and a half of shocking revelation